Welcome back. Today I'm showing you these fun fall wet on wet designs. One of them is this cute little ombre pumpkin. I used a couple of different colors of icing to create this ombre effect, and this cute candy corn pattern. So you could use this pattern as a standalone cookie just to be adorable on its own, or you could place some writing over the top. You could do a stencil, a design, whatever your heart desires. This tutorial also goes through this cute little candy pattern, which I think is so fun for Halloween. We're coming up on Halloween and those fall and end of the year holidays, so I'm really excited to start getting some cookie designs together for those. If we haven't met yet, I'm Sarah Grace. I teach cookie decorators the techniques that are going to make them stand out in their community, because I believe that high quality cookies are the best marketing you can have. Our method of the month this month that I've kind of been focused on has been wet on wet icing. So this is just where you are taking icing that's wet, you haven't let it dry yet, you're putting more icing on top of it, and it makes this kind of melded together smooth surface pattern, and it's really pretty. These cookies are from our upcoming class all about the wet on wet technique, and I'll have more information about that class coming out next week after it's dropped. This is just a little sneak peek to give you a taste of what's going to be inside that class. This is just the section of that class that's fall. We have cookies for all seasons of the year in this upcoming class, and I just wanted to share a little tidbit of it with you. That way I could let my YouTube people get a little sneak peek before the actual release of the class. So if you're watching this video when it comes out, which is a Tuesday, then this class will be out on Thursday. But if you're watching this later, then you can head over to sarahgracecookieco.com/online classes to find this and more online classes about cookie decorating that you might enjoy. Y'all, there is a wasper in my kitchen. I've got the door open so I've got good light, and there are waspers and honeybees and all kinds of crazy stuff coming in my kitchen. So I'm going to end this video and get straight into the cookie decorating before I get stung. It's time to make fall cookies. I absolutely love the fall season. This class is coming out in September, so we're just starting to get beautiful fall things and fall decor put out, and I'm here for it. I'm drinking my pumpkin spice latte almost daily. So this first cookie is going to be a pattern cookie with the cute little candy corn pattern. I love using this as a backdrop for any kind of Halloween cookie, especially if you want to like write over the top of it. I think that looks really cute. So I'm starting by flooding this cookie with this pale green color. I'm doing sort of a thin flood like we talked about in the intro, because I am going to be doing a pattern over top, and when you're putting more icing on top of existing icing, you want to make sure that you don't overfill that cookie. We're not going for Sunday makeup here. We're going for Tuesday night at home with our pajamas on kind of makeup. Kind of not much there. You can use your scribe tool to kind of coerce this out toward the edges. You may have to do a little more work than you're used to doing on the flood, because it does, when it's thinner like that, it does take a little bit more effort to get it to the edge. But this is a good thing, because you don't want so much flood underneath your pattern that it's falling over the edge of the cookie. So next I'm going to take my Royal Icing in yellow. Again, this is still that same 20-second consistency that I showed you how to make in the icing mixing portion. And I think I said yellow, but I meant orange. We're going to be using yellow in a minute. I'm making a little smile shape with this orange, and I'm making the smiles go in a couple different directions because this is going to be the bottom of our candy corn. We want it to be a little bit curved because that's the shape of a candy corn, and I'm just trying to do some different random directions so that these will be my indicator of where to put each piece of candy corn. Now I'm taking the yellow and I'm creating the middle of each of the candy corn pieces. And you can see for this technique, I'm just piping over the top of what I've already flooded, and it's kind of coming together to make the beginnings of those candy corn shapes. Sometimes you'll need to use your piping bag to kind of coerce the icing and wiggle it together so that it makes a solid shape. Sometimes when you're doing the wet on wet technique, it doesn't immediately flow together. So you might have to take just the tip of your icing bag and wiggle it together a bit, almost like you would use a scribe, but it doesn't really require you to get your scribe out and do a whole lot to it. Next, we're adding the little white tips of the candy corns. I'm just doing some small triangle shapes. And kind of using my scribe to incorporate them in with the yellow. So I'm lifting it up off of the cookie, but I'm using it when I get done with that shape. I'm kind of dipping it into the icing and wiggling it. And you can see that I worked pretty quickly so that I could get all of these colors on before the bottom layer of flood dried. I'm gonna allow this cookie to dry completely, and then I'm gonna take my edible ink marker and just trace around the outline of each of these candy corns. This is kind of like putting your mascara on when you're doing your makeup. It's that final touch that gives it a little bit of pop and just makes it really stand out. You can use this pattern as a standalone cookie. I've popped a border around this one so that it looks like its own standalone cookie, but you can also use this as a backdrop. You could pop on a pumpkin, or you could add some wording maybe. If you wanted to use a stencil, you could do that as well. I also think it would be really cute to use one of my Royal Icing transfers for all seasons and do like a little fall leaf or gourd on there. That would be super sweet too. Next, we have our Ombre pumpkin. This is a larger design, so I'm popping it directly onto the cookie rather than on top of the flood. This is going to help us avoid some of that spillover that sometimes happens when we're doing wet on wet designs. I'm starting with my dark orange at the bottom and making just like a bottom of a pumpkin shape. If you have a pumpkin cookie cutter, you can place it on this cookie and trace it with your edible marker. You can make a little indentation with it in your cookie before you bake it if you'd like some help creating this shape. I popped a little bit of red onto that orange. That's gonna kind of blend in and make a darker ombre at the bottom. But I don't want a lot of red because I don't want a red pumpkin. Then I'm finishing out the top of the pumpkin shape with orange and white. I just freehanded mine, as you can tell, because it's just a little bit wonky. We're going for rustic here. But again, you can use a template or a cookie cutter to help you get this shape down pat. Now I'm using the blend technique that we talked about in the intro. I'm just blending these two colors together by wiggling them with my scribe, and I'm going through quite a bit to get these to blend completely together. It doesn't really happen the first 2 or 3 strokes. You have to really work with it. And I'm pulling down from the top and up from the bottom to blend these two together. Then I switch to going side to side, and you can see that this creates one seamless color together. After I've blended that orange and red, I'm blending the yellow and orange together, and I continue this process throughout each of the color combinations. So this is becoming a 3rd or 4th color that is a mixture of the orange and yellow, and then as we move up, there will be a mixture of the yellow and white, and it'll create this really smooth, pretty ombre effect. I'm pretty happy with the amount of ombre on that pumpkin now, so I'm going to take my dark green. Again, this is also that flood consistency. Every icing that I'm using in this tutorial is the 22nd flood. And I'm going to pop around that pumpkin. When I'm popping around a large design like this and I'm doing wet icing next to wet icing, I like to just get as close as possible to that first design and then go around to make my outline. I find that it's easier to get to the edge of the design before I outline the very edge of the cookie. And then I fill in between the spaces. You can always use your scribe to adjust if you have a little space between your flood and the design that you've just popped. It's no big deal. You can use that scribe and it'll help you out. But you can do a little bit of thicker flood when you're doing the flood around a larger design like this. You don't have to worry about overflow quite as much, especially when you're using that nice thick 20-second consistency. Now I've allowed this cookie to dry completely. For me, usually that takes anywhere from 6 to 8 hours. I like to try and let them dry overnight if at all possible, but you want to make sure that there's no give and no shine left to the icing. It should look kind of matte or much more matte than it did when you started. And it should not give when you touch it at all. It shouldn't be sticky in any way. You can use a dehydrator to speed up this process or a cool oven. Now I'm just kind of drawing on a doodled pumpkin shape. I love to look at Pinterest for doodling ideas, like if I'm kind of struggling with how to draw something. I'm not a super talented artist when it comes to drawing. I guess I enjoy painting more. So when it comes to line drawings like this, I like to look at Pinterest and look up pumpkin doodle drawings or flower doodle drawings, and that helps me when it comes to fine lining and going over these wet on wet designs. The last cookie in this fall set is the candy pattern that I showed you in the intro video. Because this is a pattern with small pieces and not one of those bigger standalone designs, I am popping a flood layer on the bottom. This is going to be the background, and I'm popping it nice and thin. We don't want a whole lot that could possibly flow over the edge. So I'm popping it thin and kind of bringing it to the edge manually with my scribe instead of relying on the icing to kind of flow out like I normally. To create the candy shapes, I'm just making little rings of each of my pastel colors, blue, yellow, and pink. Then I'm adding a pretty good bit of white into the center, and then I'll layer that same color of whatever the dot is, blue, yellow, or pink, over the top. And when I swirl these together, it'll look like swirled peppermint candy. Just want to dip the very tip of your scribe into the icing and give it a few swirls around. The goal here isn't to blend the two colors together like it was when we were making the ombre pumpkin. The goal here is to make this swirl pattern. This is great when you're doing rosettes like we talk about in the spring section tutorial of this class. You can add some leaves to these and they make rosettes. But if you want to make candy, add a little white wrapper shape. I just did like a three-pronged shape. It doesn't have to be perfect to look like what you want it to look like. You see the little swirl and you see the two edges pulled out like that, and you understand that it's candy. So it's basically just a little white dot. You can go ahead and pull it out if you want to, but when you add the white dot, grab your scribe, pull from the bottom out to create the 3 little pointy pieces that looks like a wrapper. And don't forget, when you're doing the pull method, the pull stroke with your scribe, you want to wipe between each pull. So pull and wipe, pull and wipe, pull and wipe. Or you're going to end up with orange next to your blue, and your colors will be in places that you don't want them to be, which is not the goal. Just give it a little wipe between each stroke and you'll have nice, clean, pretty patterns and colors. Once that's completely dry, again 6 to 8 hours, you can go over it with that marker, the edible ink marker, and create those fine lines to give it that finishing touch.